Oh, we're number 9 across future.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear us and see us. We'll be starting momentarily. On time, hopefully. My goodness, my hair looks like I've done nothing with it. And that's because I haven't. I looked in the mirror before we started. I was like, "That'll do." And now I'm looking at it on the stream. I'm like, this is not gonna
It
do."
looks fine.
It looks
We're guys.
unprofessional.
We can get away with it.
Mm.
And the fact I'm wearing pants is good enough.
Fair. Greg says, "Hello guys. Well, with Twitch ending free live stream content as of Monday, the November 13th, I guess this is the place for Windows content now. I had no idea Twitch was killing its live stream for free. Interesting. So, are all their podcasts going premium then, or is it just you can't listen to it as it's being recorded anymore? Because that's not a big deal. Live podcasts are everything, guys.
They've had their subscription service for a long time.
Yeah,
that gives you like a lot of extra benefits.
Right.
And if they've seen success with it, and they can start to put stuff behind that. Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean definitely.
Yeah, it sounds like they're just gonna take the live stream private or to premium only, and then the episodes are still free after the fact. But yeah, well, we're gonna try and do this live as long as we can.
Until we sell out.
Yeah. Right, I'm ready to
Actually, there's been, well, I'll talk to you about that after.
Okay. I have no idea what he's talking about. So.
Let's see. Let me get the notes up. I hate how with the new... have you noticed it's hard to grab Word and move it?
I have not noticed that.
Because it's hard to grab the taskbar. Like what do you call it? What's the top bar called?
Yeah, the title bar.
Yeah, because it's like full of words.
No,
so you don't have much area to grab.
You grab above that, where the search bar is, next to it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying though. It's like I have to be very precise where my cursor goes.
Oh, yeah, but you can actually grab anywhere on that top bar, even on a button, and it will still act as a title bar.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. See, that bothers me. I can't believe that doesn't bother you.
Because you don't trust it.
It just feels wrong.
Yeah. That's fair.
Okay. Anyway, I am now recording. 3, 2, 1, clap. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 332 for November 10th, 2023. Hey everyone, Deanna Rubino here, joining Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast. This week we got, well, of course, the latest on Windows 11, including those new insider builds, and this rumor that started. How'd that start, Zach? About CoPilot apparently is going to head to Windows 10, which is interesting on a few levels. I think the explanation is pretty obvious, but Microsoft hasn't really been updating Windows 10 with new features, but looks like they make an exception here. We're going to follow up on last week's Snapdragon X Elite / Orion CPU discussion versus Apple, because we talked last week about the M3 as well as the M2s and versus, and now as the reviews have been dropping for the new MacBooks and people have been getting theirs, we now do have benchmarks for the M3, the M3 Pro, and the M3 Max. And so I'll talk about how those stack up, how I'm still fighting the Apple fans on the internets and winning. I'll just say that. Finally, we'll go on to, well, not finally, there's two other things. Steam and their Steam Deck, well, I should say Valve and their Steam Deck, is making some interesting waves this week. First, some talk of Steam Deck 2 actually came out. But before that, something more exciting is the announcement officially of Steam Deck OLED, which, I don't know. I think I'll explain how that was being conflated with, I think, the Steam Deck 2. Also, the Legion Go from Lenovo is on sale now. Our review's coming out. Well, it should be live Monday, actually. I have one. I'm not doing the review. Rebecca Spear is because she has all the devices and is an actual gamer. But I'll talk about my experience with Legion Go, what I think about it so far, and how it differs from all these other two devices, and maybe which one you should consider getting. And then finally, oh my God, drama, drama around OneDrive. Oh my God, the world almost ended for really nerdy people who like Windows, who really get bothered with little pop-up messages when trying to close things. We'll talk about that, and I'll put it into perspective. You could probably feel a little rants coming on there, even though technically I get it. Anyway, Zach, how are you doing on this fine, slightly chilly Friday?
I am not too bad. How have you been?
Well, I'll skip over the dog eating marijuana part last night. Because that kind of explains it all.
Yeah.
That sounds like it could be funny, and it could be funny, but it hit him so hard, we were worried he was going to die. Now, I will say the fatality rates of dogs when they consume marijuana things, and we didn't do this on purpose, obviously. He got it into himself. It's very low. So it's, I mean, when was the last time you heard of someone dying of pot overdose? But it does affect dogs differently. So I was up all night with him. The good news is he's fine now. He's much better. He's wagging his tail and running around. So, but it's that puppy drama, man. Like, all I'm thinking in my head is like, what's the fatality rate overall with people with puppies? Because in my head, it's gotta be like 20%.
Yeah, I mean,
the way these things.
Yeah, they're like children, but forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, I don't know. Like, do people just regularly have puppies dying because they're eating things and just doing things that they shouldn't? Because it seems like it would be the case. I'm terrified of having them, and which reminds me, I probably shouldn't have kids. But anywho, that's not what you guys are here for. Let's move on to Windows 11 and the news there. Zach, what has happened in the world of Windows this week with those insider builds?
Nothing. No, I'm kidding. A few things happened this week. Nothing too major, but we are starting to see things pick up in the Canary channel, which is, or the Canary channel, the fast channel, I guess. Build 25992. Things are starting to pick up there. Because I've mentioned it before, we're now sort of moving into that next phase of Windows development. We're on the lead up to Windows V next, Hudson Valley, and so the Canary channel is where most of that development work is ongoing. And so we're starting to see some more interesting things show up there versus in the dev channel. Because if you remember a few weeks or even a couple of months back now, the dev channel was the branch to be in if you wanted any new features, and then the Canary channel was kind of like boring with mostly platform stuff. I mean, it's still getting platform stuff, but it's now finally getting some surface level features as well. So with 25992, we've got the ability now to create different archive formats. Obviously, earlier this year, Microsoft added the ability to extract different archive formats in the form of RAR files or 7-zip files or tar files alongside zip files. But the production build of Windows still can't create those archive formats. It can only extract them. That changes with this week's Insider build. You can now create them. There's a dedicated compressed to menu in the context menu. When you click on that, there's an option to create a zip file or a 7-zip file or a tar file. There's no RAR file type in there. I'm assuming that's because licensing and whatnot. WinRAR is technically a paid for piece of software, and so to create a RAR file, Microsoft would probably have to pay a license for that, and they don't want to. So there's no option to create a RAR file. But all the others, 7-zip, tar, the open source ones are all in Windows now, and you can create with them natively without having to download any programs, which is pretty awesome. And then the updated snap layouts, which use machine learning to sort of identify which apps you might want to have snapped side by side, is back. This was a thing they announced a number of months ago. Then they pulled it from the builds for whatever reason, quality concerns or something. But it's back again, and it works as you would expect. So you can use the little mouse cursor, your mouse cursor, to go up to the maximize button, have the little snap layouts menu drop down, and in addition to the sort of blank spaces you get, there'll be an additional row that has apps sort of automatically put into the places, and Windows, to my knowledge, will analyze your usage and identify which apps you usually have snapped most often. So if you have Edge and Microsoft Store and Notepad snapped side by side, or one on one half and then two in smaller boxes on the right, Windows will identify that, and next time you have those three apps open and you go up to the snap menu, it'll be like, hey, you normally have Edge and this and that open. Let's click this one button and it will snap all three apps into your usual grid automatically. So it's supposed to be sort of like streamlining the the process of snapping in Windows. I will say I love snapping in Windows. I think it's Windows' best feature. It's the thing I miss most whenever I have to use a Mac, is the fact that Mac doesn't natively have any window snapping capabilities, and it's god awful. It's like going back in time 20 years using a Mac when it comes to window management. Even things like Chrome OS, I think, has window snapping of some form. But Windows is definitely the best.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
I think it's the smoothest as well. I love the animations and stuff that they have with snapping on Windows 11. I think it's all just really nice. And so good to see that they're continuing to improve it. There's some interesting changes going on behind the scenes in this build as well. One of the changes people spotted was they seem to be testing a different placement for the CoPilot button on the taskbar. Right now, obviously, CoPilot sort of sits amongst all the other sort of system buttons on the taskbar. So you've got Start, CoPilot, Search, Task View, and those are sort of counted as the system buttons. But they're testing a different placement for it, where they move that CoPilot button to the very far end of the taskbar on the right, so beyond the date and time. So it pushes the date and time stuff to the left slightly, places the Code button in the far right corner, and it exists there. Now I've tried it out. It is interesting. I see what they're thinking about here. I see why they're testing this, because it makes sense if you think about how the weather button on the left pulls out a panel that slides out from the left. CoPilot is an interface that slides out from the right, so it would make sense for that button to be on the very far right of the taskbar, so when you click on it, that panel slides out at the very top. That makes sense, I think, but at least in its current implementation, again, this is preview software, it could still change. The way it is next to the date and time, it looks terrible. They really need to polish. They need to change how the date and time in the system tray looks for the CoPilot button to make sense in that corner. So I'll be interested to see if they actually go ahead with that, because like I said, this hasn't been announced. This is technically something you can enable in the build. It may just be an experiment. It may be something more that they're planning, right? I don't know. But yeah, they do appear to be sort of experimenting with different placements of the CoPilot button on the taskbar. I do agree that where it is currently sort of diminishes it a little bit, because it's like, oh, it's just another system function. Because all of these sort of system buttons are sort of boring, sort of surface level system functions, right? Start, task view, it's like, yeah, search. CoPilot, I think, should be its own dedicated thing, and it should be, I think the system tray does make sense for it, but maybe not where they've tested it right now. I think maybe if it's going to be anywhere, it should be on the other side of the system tray where the Wi-Fi icon and stuff is. But yeah, I guess we'll see. And I think that's it for the Canary channel. The dev channel, there's not much going on. They've added a bunch more uninstallable inbox apps. Microsoft has been on this parade this last year or so, just allowing users to uninstall basically every inbox app in Windows. Now the camera app, Cortana, Photos, People, and remote desktop apps can be uninstalled, which is great. So at this point, the only apps you sort of can't uninstall are like the core system functions, things like Settings or File Explorer, or there's a few more, I think, as well. Phone Link is one you can't uninstall, which is quite interesting. But most of them you can now. So if you're somebody who really doesn't like any Microsoft services or apps, and you just want Windows because of its compatibility with third-party apps, you can create a new, install Windows, uninstall everything, almost everything from it, and go about your day. And you should still be fine. You still can't uninstall Edge, so don't try. Actually, can you? You can't officially uninstall Edge, but I'm sure there are workarounds for it.
Sure.
But yeah, Dan, what are your thoughts on these changes? Are you interested in any of them specifically?
I like I agree with you with Snap, right? I agree that's a core feature of Windows. It's really its strength. I think this idea is cool. As someone who sits in front of the same desktop PC every single day, who snaps his Windows, I have a regular pattern to things I'm snapping. And the idea that the OS is machine learning that, and giving me those kind of suggestions, I think is the kind of stuff I really want to see in operating systems. I've been talking about this for years when, AI, machine learning, that the idea is to make operating systems proactive. That is, they anticipate the thing you're going to do based on your previous history. It's a philosophy of determinism for operating systems, basically. Every action is preceded by a previous action, which dictates what the future actions will be. And I think that's like a really good thing. So I like this. I talked about in the Fold how, HP's expanded the Snap layout. I think Snap layouts, is one of the coolest things they've done recently. It just gives so many options, and it's great for people And what's neat about it, too, it's like it depends on your display. Like that's what's cool about it. Like what I mean is, depending on the device you're using, the snap layout options vary. If you're using ultra wide, it gives you different like layout options versus if you're on like a typical screen or a very large display. I think that's pretty wild. Uh, yeah, the stuff with the icons, all of that, it's kind of interesting too. They did add, and this is kind of cool, the support for 7-zip, for creating 7-zip
Yeah.
and tar archives, which I thought was neat because we had that like we knew you could unlock, unzip them
Hmm.
or whatever you want to call it, unarchive them. We knew that was there. That was that feature that was announced already. But then there was always this question like, oh, but you probably need the app to create it, and that's kind of the angle,
Yeah.
so they don't like. But now it's like, oh, you can create them and unarchive them. It's like you really actually don't need the app unless, you're doing some really advanced compression stuff, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
right now, yeah. There's no option to like customize the compression ratio or anything like that. It is just a
Yeah,
basic zip up and unzip functionality, which I think for 90% of people dealing with these files
sure.
is all you need. You don't need,
Yep.
I want a 75% compression ratio. It's like most people don't care. It's like whatever.
Yeah, and it's like even just having zip built in was awesome. The ability to, again, it's like, I think this has just been a slow improvement with Windows. People kind of forget it, but back in the day, you would have to download, WinZip
Yeah.
and do the trialware and all that kind of stuff, and have the little countdown reminder for you to enter the key before it lets you go into the app if you didn't buy it. Or shareware. That was back in the day. Remember shareware? That was great. And I'm being sarcastic. It wasn't great, but you needed that app if you wanted to create and like work with zips. Now just having it built in is just like it's so much easier, nicer. And 7-zip and tar and all that kind of stuff. Not as used widely, but again, RAR files, stuff like that. When you get that stuff popping in every once in a while, someone sends you that. You're like, oh, great.
Yeah.
Nothing's worse than when you click it and you get that association window. Like, you want to look for this app in the
Yeah.
store. It's like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
OS has no idea what to do with it. Like, now you don't have that problem.
Mhm.
That reduces friction for usage. So I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah,
But,
quality.
yeah, that's
This
pretty
is
much
all
it.
quality of life updates to Windows. It's stuff that I think has
Yeah.
been in need of for a while, and I'm glad they're doing it. Yeah, it really does change the game. It makes Windows just more fun to use. Moving on to the other topic we've got about Windows 10 stuff. So this is quite interesting. I wrote a report this week detailing Microsoft's plan to essentially backport Windows CoPilot to Windows 10. Up until now, Windows CoPilot has been advertised as exclusively a Windows 11 feature. They announced it at Build earlier this year. It was announced as a Windows 11 thing. And then as it's started to roll out this fall, it has been on Windows 11, first through the 22H2 Moment 4 updates, and now with version 23H2. And that's where it has existed. Microsoft has never at one point said that they plan to bring this to Windows 10, but I have heard from sources internally that actually, yeah, the plan is to backport this to Windows 10. Now, to my knowledge, that wasn't always the plan. That is a plan that has come into effect very recently. Almost, I think, around the same time Panos Panay left. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think what we're seeing here is a change in strategy to how Microsoft is treating the two in-market versions of Windows under new Windows leadership. Obviously, we have the Windows Web Experiences division now, which is leading the Windows product. And that has new leaders in it. Panos Panay is no longer there. He's in the rearview mirror. And so changes are being made to how Microsoft treats Windows, as is always the case when new leadership takes over. And I think what we're seeing here, based on conversations I've had with sources, is the new Windows leadership team is quite interested in the Windows 10 user base, whereas under Panos Panay, Windows and Microsoft were very quick to move on from Windows 10, right? They almost essentially abandoned it as soon as they possibly could. They did release one or two more minor feature updates in the fall of 2021 and 2022, but that was it, right? There's no 23H2 plan for Windows 10, and there's certainly no 24H2 plan for Windows 10. And Windows 10 at this current time is set to reach end of life in October 2025. Under Panay, I'm almost certain that would have remained the case. Now we have new Windows leadership in tow, and they seem to be much more interested in Windows 10. Well, not more interested, but they understand that Windows 10 is still the dominant Windows OS. It still has 70% market share. It still has 1 billion users versus Windows 11's 400 million. they're viewing that user base as, an untapped market for some of these new features they've been working on. This last year has been AI central, and Windows 10 users have seen almost none of it. That's 70% of Windows users who aren't seeing any of this AI advancements, which Microsoft would love to get things in front of. And so the new Windows leadership team have likely been tasked with, hey, you need to get CoPilot usage up. How best to do that? Well, there's a billion users we are ignoring over here that we could just throw a CoPilot button on the taskbar of, and hopefully that increases usage of CoPilot. So that's pretty much what I'm hearing. And I don't think CoPilot will be the first and the last feature here. I think we're going to see a number of other features that are currently Windows 11 exclusive make their way back to Windows 10, because Microsoft wants to have these services, these things they're working on, in use by more people. And 400 million users is great, but it's not a billion. A billion users is more. And so obviously, from a business perspective, it makes total sense that they are now looking at backporting CoPilot and a number of other possibly AI functions to Windows 10. It's a good thing for leverage when it comes to developers, right? Because one of the things that's going to make CoPilot great is plugins, third-party plugins. Right now, there aren't any, or if there are very few of them. For CoPilot to succeed, it's going to need plugins, and everyone needs to be on board. Right now, there's 400 million users, which is a big number, and Microsoft can tell developers, hey, you build for CoPilot, you build for 400 million potential customers. But that number is a lot more enticing if they can say you build for 1.4 billion customers, right? Because one plugin should ideally work across Windows 11 and Windows 10, because it's technically the same experience, it's the same platform. There's no reason why that should differ. And so that will possibly encourage developers to build for CoPilot versus a competitor. Google's got Bard, and I'm sure at some point Bard will support plugins of its own. And so there will be competing platforms for AI plugins. And so developers will either have to choose one or the other, or maybe they'll be forced to use both, as both have a billion users or more. So those are the reasons why I'm hearing they're moving CoPilot to Windows 10. It's part of this sort of, I don't want to call it, I don't want to say that they're going back and sort of rejuvenating Windows 10, because they're not. I don't think that's the plan. But I do think they're going to be very selective of things that they can backport, and they will do it. So even though Microsoft has announced that Windows 10 is technically done and they're getting no more feature updates, I think we're going to see Microsoft sort of reverse on that decision ever so slightly as we go into 2024. Will Microsoft extend the end of life dates? I think they will. I have asked internally if that's the plan. To my knowledge, that has not been decided upon yet. There have been discussions ongoing internally as recently as this week, to my knowledge, about this. But a decision, at least I've not heard yet if a decision has been made. But if I had to guess, an educated guess, they will extend it. There's no way October 2025 rolls around and it expires, because I'm pretty sure Windows 10 will still have at like 50% of usage at that point. In 2 years' time, there's no way it drops below 30. Especially if the Windows 11 system requirements remain, because at some point the amount of PCs that are even eligible for Windows 11 will expire. They will run out. Everyone who is technically eligible will upgrade, and I still think that's going to leave most Windows 10 PCs. So I guess we'll see about that. Dan, what are your thoughts on this? Did you think it makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft is always trying to, I don't want to say inflate the numbers. I mean, that is technically the goal, but get increased adoption of a certain thing, whether it's Edge, whether it's Office, or in this case, CoPilot. And that's what they do. That's what a business does. And it would be weird to have this sort of brand new semi-magic technology. It's not quite there yet, but we see, where it's kind of going. And to leave out what is still a large percentage of PC users who are Windows 10 for various reasons. We've always talked about, schools, enterprise, hospitals, military. A lot of them are still on Windows 10 due to they have strict budgets in terms of updates and compatible software. Well, I worked in the sleep lab, our PCs were, I forgot what we were running at the time, but it was the older version of Windows. And it's because we ran borderline proprietary technology to do the sleep analysis. It was very complicated software that only like one company makes. And you have to plug in a lot of hardware into it for the monitoring that you were doing. So it's like, the last thing you want to do is update the operating system, especially because the user wasn't really using the operating system. It was a platform in the truest sense. It was just a thing in the background that allowed you to run that app that you really needed. We did run other apps, of course, uh, but there was no reason for the hospital at the time to upgrade that outside of eventually security, because these were connected to the internet. So that makes sense. And then, so then wanting to put CoPilot, I think is actually a smart decision. And, you talked about before with the insider build and they moved the icon to the right side to balance off. I think that's a great decision, honestly. It makes more sense. It's more ergonomic. I think it looks better. I kind of like, this thought of, where they're going with all this stuff. So I think I use CoPilot quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's because I'm finding, well, last night when my dog was overly high, I was using CoPilot a lot to ask questions, because it's better than search. Yeah, I use search here and there too, of course, but CoPilot is really just good at summarizing a large chunk of data for general questions into like a readable paragraph. And if you're using your phone, it even reads it to you so you can be doing other things. Like, I think this technology is really awesome. So I'm kind of glad that Microsoft is expanding it to Windows 10 users, or at least that's what we're hearing, but we definitely expect it to.
The other thing I wanted to mention on this sort of topic, it is kind of related. The Windows 10 stuff, that the idea that the new Windows leadership team or the org is interested in sort of bringing Windows 10 users along with select new things. I think this plays into a bigger mindset that the new leadership team has with market share and what people are using and where they are, and fragmenting the market. Right now, there are two versions of Windows that are supported: Windows 10 and Windows 11. I don't think Windows 8.1 is supported anymore. If it is, it's leaving support very soon. But essentially, for all intents and purposes, there's two versions of Windows on the market: Windows 10 and Windows 11. Windows 10 is the majority; they have 70%. Windows 11 has 30%. Now we've been talking a lot about this idea of a Windows 12, right, coming next year. I've been asking around about this because never have I explicitly said next year the Hudson Valley is Windows 12. That's a thing the media sort of ran with, and it for continuity it makes sense for us to refer to it as Windows 12 because it simplifies it in everyone's mind as the next version of Windows coming next year. But and under Panos Panay, I think it was very possible that Hudson Valley was going to be Windows 12 based on some of the stuff I'd heard that they were planning under Panos Panay. It was almost a done deal that Hudson Valley would have been a Windows 12. But this new leadership, I've been hearing things about this new leadership team ever since they've taken over. And one of the things that has become clear to me is that they're not so keen on the idea of more Windows products on the market. They don't want to continue fragmenting the Windows user base. If they do a Windows 12 next year, then that's just a third version of the OS people refuse to upgrade to. It's like, well, what do they do?
The 70-30 distinction that's pretty massive.
Yeah, it is, right? And then what Windows 12 will be what? Maybe it'll eat into 15% of Windows 11's market share. Like, it's like,
right?
Where are we going from here? What's the plan? How do we get everyone back on one version of Windows, essentially? So I would not be surprised if Hudson Valley ships next year as a Windows 11 update instead of Windows 12. From a technical perspective, I think it would warrant Windows 12. I think under the hood, there are lots of platform improvements coming. The next-gen AI stuff that I've been hearing about is insane, and that's still coming, but I think they will market it as Windows 11 versus Windows 12. Only for this very reason. It's for market share. It's so Windows 11 users are less scared to update to it, and there's still only two versions of Windows in the market versus adding a new one, and now there being three competing versions of Windows. So I'm going on record to say... Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, it's mostly a marketing thing too, right? Because you're right. Sure. It's, you can call it Windows 12 because of all the changes, but they're not just for almost superficial reasons.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, fairly so.
I mean,
Go.
I was going to say, maybe they could call it Windows 11.1 like they used to do the
I would be
0.1s.
okay with that. I so would. But again, I think they're worried about fragmenting. Like, even 0.1 implies newer, right? Versus Windows 11, just 2024 update, which is just like whatever. It is a shame because then there's not as much hype around it. But I think maybe Microsoft is hoping that what you see in regards to what they're adding to this next release will be enough for you to see it as a major thing, even though the name of it won't be as major. But yeah, I think I'm going to go on record and say I don't think it'll be Windows 12. I think it's more likely to be Windows 11. I'd like to be wrong. I'd be a huge fan of if they come out and be like, hey, new Windows 12 aware, some new hardware. I'm all about that. But I just don't think it's going to happen. Not with this new Windows leadership team.
Yeah, I mean, Windows 12 would be nice, but I'll be honest, like, I just would be happy to just want Windows 11 2024 edition.
Yeah, or Windows 11 Plus. Because it's like new AI era. It's like, I don't know, like something, just more Windows 11, I think, is what they're going to go for.
I just want like the year just so we can reference something. Like,
yeah,
because that's the tough part with these, what were these moment updates,
right?
These H updates, you know, what do you want to call them? It was just like, what do you call it? It's just like, well, it's just Windows 11. And it's just like, okay. I should also mention and plug that on our YouTube channel for Windows Central, you do have a walkthrough video of the latest Canary build with Windows 11. So all those things we talked about regarding those snap windows, the movement of CoPilot, the new archive abilities is all demonstrated. So if you want to go see it in action, because like me, you're just not I don't have the time to put it on all my laptops and keep track of it. But if you just want to see it in action to see what's probably coming, you know, these things could change. That's always the caveat, but go check out the video. It's pretty cool. But yeah.
Okay, I think.
Sorry. I just want to answer. David V is asking, what is everyone using Windows CoPilot for besides changing to dark mode? Which to me is hilarious because that's the last thing I'm going to use it for. I've never actually asked it to change to dark mode. I will tell you one of the coolest features in Edge that I think we're covering. We might have an article on it that I think people are overlooking is open your CoPilot and ask it to organize your tabs. That is one that if you're a person like me, like I sometimes have like 140 tabs open, and that's because I'm just doing work all day on the internet, right? That's what my job is. If you ask CoPilot to organize it, it's going to logically organize your tabs. But what's cool is it gives you a preview of it, and you can actually adjust it. You can also give it feedback, a little thumbs up or thumbs down, whether you liked the arrangement or not, so they can know if it's working. But then when you hear, like, you know, do it, it will just organize your tabs into groups using the group function, and it labels them too. And I used it for the first time this week. I was pretty damn impressed with it. It really did organize all my tabs into logically sound groupings. I thought that was one of the coolest things I've seen yet. So I think, you know, in terms of what I use CoPilot for, that's CoPilot and Edge. I think that's awesome. The dark mode thing, who changes dark mode? I don't know. I thought it was more cool when Lenovo had a dedicated button on their Yoga series that allows you to shift the themes. That's kind of cool. I would never go into dark mode. I don't see myself ever going to CoPilot to do Windows functions. I just don't. The only thing I could, if it was voice activated, maybe, you know, and then I could just be like, hey, CoPilot, you know, turn the volume up to 40, or, you know, turn my brightness down to 20. Like maybe I would use that, but even that just feels kind of strange. What about you?
I mean, I'm not a super heavy CoPilot user. I've just not found a scenario where I find it faster than doing it myself, I guess, is the problem right now. It always, for me, it always comes back to speed. It's just quite slow right now, unless you're doing a search query that is like multiple levels, in which case, yeah, CoPilot is technically faster because obviously it takes less time for it to compile everything into one answer versus you manually searching different criteria 4 or 5 times. But outside of that, I just don't find it faster than it. I'm faster than it most of the time for doing stuff.
It depends too. It does. I know sometimes, yeah, it's slow. Like it'll be like writing a sentence, it'll just go word.
Yeah, and I'm reading faster than it's typing, and I'm like, come on, get on.
Yeah. Well, other times I've had it go pretty quickly. That is, you know, this is why they would call it, you know, that's why we call it pre, guys. So, you know, there is this issue of like server load, costs, power usage, prioritization, as well as just in general improving the efficiency of it, which they are doing behind the scenes. But yeah, that would be my biggest complaint too. It needs to get faster.
For it to be able to do, I'd love to be able to tell it to do something for me in the future. Like an example could be like, you know, earlier this morning, you know, I knew that I'd have to be setting up for this podcast today. it would have been cool if I could have just been like, hey, CoPilot, at 5:30 p.m., can you open XSplit? Can you load up youtube.com? And can you open up my notes for the podcast that I prepared earlier this week? And it can go, yeah, I remember to do that. And then as 5:30 rolls around, it could have been like, hey, you asked me to do this. I'm popping up a notification just to let you know I'm about to open these things that you asked me to do.
Yeah.
That would be awesome because, sometimes around 5:30, I'll probably be in the shower preparing for the podcast, getting ready and stuff. And so it would be nice to just have Windows be able to do that for me automatically because I told it to earlier in the day. Another one maybe could be, Windows Update. There's a new insider build out, and I could be like, hey, CoPilot, there's a new insider build out. Can you update to it and restart the computer for me once it's done downloading? Because right now, Windows Update will do that, but once it's ready to restart, it won't just automatically restart for you. It'll be like pending restart, press restart now. And if I'm going out for the evening, I'm not going to, it would be sitting there waiting until I get back versus if I can just say, hey, CoPilot, when the update's ready to restart for me, please. Stuff like that, I think would be infinitely more useful to me personally.
And the other benefit to that is, when it does those pop-ups and reminders and stuff, The Verge can then write an article talk about how annoying it is and how they're doing this. Microsoft's now doing this thing where CoPilot is keep pop-ups. That seems like, we might as well just pre-write that article at this point and just get it ready to fire off, so we can get that outrage clicks going. Anywho.
All right, before we get onto that, I want to just quickly read this ad read because we need to do it. Okay, so as always, this episode of Windows Central Podcast is sponsored by Indeed. When it comes to hiring, don't wait for great talent to find you. Find them first with Indeed. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed is a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. They streamline hiring with powerful tools that find you match candidates, and with Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed. One of the things we think is pretty awesome about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so easy because candidates you invite to apply are 3 times more likely to apply to a job than candidates who only see it in search, according to Indeed. And they get you one step closer to the hire by immediately matching you with quality candidates. Indeed does the hard work for you. Even better, Indeed is the only job site where you only pay for applications that meet your must-have requirements. Indeed is an unbelievably powerful hiring platform, delivering 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined, according to Talent Nest. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that uses Indeed to hire great talent fast. So start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/WCP. That offer is good for a limited time only. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/WCP. Just go to Indeed.com/WCP and support the show by saying you heard about it on this podcast. Indeed.com/WCP. Terms and conditions do apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Thank you Indeed for sponsoring this episode. And now it's on to... Do you want to talk about the OneDrive stuff then?
Yeah, might as well segue into that. That's fine. Do you want to lead that?
Oh, yeah, sure. I can lead it. Yeah. So this week news sort of broke, I guess, that OneDrive was polling users on why they were trying to quit the app. So if you were going down to the OneDrive icon and you were right-clicking on it and you were going to the little the little settings icon, and then you're going down to pause syncing and then quit OneDrive, a little pop-up would appear which would be like, hey, we can see you're quitting OneDrive. Can you tell us why? And people got upset. People were not happy about this.
Did they?
Well, some people did. Some people got upset. Yeah, this was an A/B thing, I think, because I tried this and none of my PCs were showing that prompt. It was giving me a prompt just confirming I wanted to quit, but it wasn't asking why I wanted to quit. I don't know if you saw that prompt, but it wasn't here on any of my PCs, and I have about 100 of them. So I don't know how many people were seeing this. But yeah, it angered a few people. I personally couldn't care less, to be honest. I would tell them, because your app sucks. Quit. I don't know.
I thought, let's get to the reason why they were doing this, which is, so people were closing OneDrive, and it's a legit question, why are you closing it? And it's so one of the choices was, I forgot exactly what it was, but it consumes too much resources, or I fear it's consuming too much resources. And that's a thing, right? It's like in the old days of Android. Remember, you have to, people would have apps that would just close the background apps and then like clear the cache memory so Android would run better. Like that was like a thing for many years. And then it came out like they fixed it, but those apps still existed. And then people were like, actually, when you're forced closing those apps, you're making the system slower and all this kind of stuff. So there's like, there's that question, right? Is OneDrive consuming too much background power when it's like updating stuff and all this kind of stuff. And you can see that if you run the task manager and see the performance. But is that a legit concern? If it is a legit concern or problem, so those are two separate things, right? One is just in your head. I'm about to game and I want all my resources available, so I'm turning off OneDrive, or I'm trying to save battery life on my laptop. I'm going to turn off OneDrive, which it actually kind of does anyway. But that's a concern. They could address that via out-of-box experience the first time you're setting up OneDrive. It could be like, just put a little thing, it doesn't use any CPU resources, it doesn't drain your battery, and hopefully that will alleviate people's concerns. That's one approach. Now, if it's a problem, that is, it actually is using a lot of resources, or a lot of resources comparatively to what people think it should be using, that's something Microsoft could also try to address in terms of trying to improve the performance and how it runs in the background and stuff. If you just don't like it or it's not working, that's another thing. So I get why they want to get feedback on this, because they're trying to make the product better. And if people just closed it and you have no reason understanding like why they're closing it, it's hard to then address the concerns of those people in the first place. In terms of like a pop-up and doing all this kind of stuff, like how often are you closing OneDrive? Like
Yeah.
I imagine like you boot up and then it runs and you turn off OneDrive and then it stays that way until the next time you restart your computer, which for many of us is very rare these days. The only time we restart our computer is when we have a significant monthly update that comes through and it tells you, or drivers come through, you need to restart your computer, in which case you need to do it one more time. I can tell you, I have a lot of apps that boot with my computer that sometimes I don't really want, and I'll just go through and close things. And it's not that big of a deal. I could, of course, just go into the task manager and be like, turn that thing off when my computer starts up, right? You can do that with OneDrive. I just found this so trite. Like, I don't know. It's like, and you're right. Not everyone is even being exposed to this. It was like kind of an A/B thing just to collect some data. But I know it's our job to cover Windows and, give Microsoft feedback. And I've always noted how Microsoft actually likes when we make legit criticisms, because they want that feedback too. They don't want us to just praise them, which is, what any company should be like. I just thought, maybe it was just because the way the world is today and everything that's going on. I just thought like this was a weird thing for people to quote unquote get outraged over. I was just like, really? Like some of the other stuff Microsoft has done in the past with pop-ups and, like everybody gets pissed with the Edge, you install Chrome and it's like gives you a pop-up to switch back to Edge, which is the same thing that everybody else does. But that one I'm a little more like, understand. I understand that one a little bit more. This one just seemed like, how many people was this actually affecting? It's not like you were in the middle of work and you're typing in, you're browsing an email, then this pop-up comes up. It wasn't like that. It was like you were already doing the action of shutting this thing down. And it's, what's weird? It's sort of like that got an article, yet I can go be on my Android smartphone and Apple smartphone, and I get pop-ups all the time when I launch apps. Mind leaving us a review?
Yeah,
leave us a review.
Are way more annoying.
Where's that article?
Where's
that article?
Yeah.
That affects me every single freaking day for all my apps. And it's just like everyone's doing that. Where's the outrage? Where's the Verge article on that one? Maybe it does exist. I don't know. But like, it doesn't seem like it's parity in terms of coverage, where that one is way more prevalent than closing OneDrive, which I don't think a lot of people were doing. Not to mention, as you said, is like an A/B test. So it's not like everyone who did close OneDrive was even getting this. So I don't know. This is just like, and I understand the business, we're in the business of covering news, and I've said it before in this podcast. We get more coverage when we criticize Microsoft and say something negative than when we say something positive. If I give a positive review to a Surface device, traffic's okay. People who are buying it want to buy it, are interested. They'll read the review. If I wrote an article like Surface Laptop Studio, the worst Surface ever made, what are they thinking? I guarantee you that article would get a ton of traffic. It would get way more
Yeah.
traffic. So there's a bias towards writing negative headlines that's just inherent in this business. And everybody who's been on any news aggregate system or watches news stuff, you intuitively know this. And it's because you're probably going to go click that article anyway. So I get that business. But sometimes even I'm just like, it just felt really kind of dumb. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I've never been super offended by any of this stuff. When you
Oh,
mentioned
wait.
this. Sorry, go on.
Sorry. So someone left in a comment, Thorat got really pissed about the OneDrive thing too. You don't say.
Yeah.
Shocked.
You
Go
mentioned
on,
the
sorry.
smartphone thing. And it happens on Windows, some Windows apps as well, that they will pop up a
Oh, yeah.
dialogue that says, "Hey, are you enjoying this app? Yes or no?" And if you click yes, then they'll then ask you, "Would you like to leave a review?" So whenever that pops up, I always say no. Every single time
Yeah.
I click no. I think developers are misunderstanding. A no review when it comes to apps, at the very least, no review is a good review. The only time people are even going to review your app is because something doesn't work and they're not happy, especially if they paid for it. I don't know why developers are so obsessed with wanting to know if their app is good. It's just
Well, I get that, but I know what you're saying too, that people are definitely more likely to leave a negative comment than a positive one.
Yeah.
If you really like a thing, there's a small chance you're going to go on the internet and broadcast that and leave comments. It's usually when you're driven by anger, you'll do that. You're right. So
And I
there
think
is that.
it's App Store's faults for pushing this idea of app reviews and the 5-star system and whatnot, and that being a decider of quality, which isn't always the case. Like you said, there's sometimes trolls out there or people who are just angry that a certain function of the app doesn't work, even though the rest of it works perfectly fine for 90% of people. There's always going to be that one person who gives it 1 star because an element of the app isn't working as they wanted it to. And so, and that's not fair on the app developer, of course. But it's also annoying for me when I get a pop-up. It's just leave me alone. I don't.
Yeah, you're trying to get into the app. You want to use it real quickly.
Yeah,
You're on
yeah.
the go, and just like, what? Oh, come on, again.
No, don't like your app.
Yeah.
Leave me alone.
I even hate how, Apple has the beta test program for app developers. What's it called?
Test flight.
Test flight. Yeah.
That whole
So
system's terrible.
right, exactly. So you got to install an app,
Yeah.
a separate app.
It's like
called
a
Test
separate
Flight,
app store.
Yeah, it's a separate app store just to get your betas into it. They don't always update when they should. So sometimes you have to just open the app and you're like, update, 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 update,
Yeah, that's
update
right.
each one. And then every time you do get an update, the next time you launch that app, you get a big window. It's like, we just installed a new beta app. Here's what's changed. And then you have to like arrow through it. And that's not like the app developer's fault. You're right. That's the test flight system. Like it does it automatically. It's like, it makes me not want to beta test. Because I'm like, I just want to check my damn email.
Android does this so much better. On Android, all the beta apps are just handled as updates to the normal app store, and that's beautiful to me. I love that.
Oh, and they make enrolling way easier.
Yeah,
it's just
one
like,
button,
by the way, this app has a beta program. Would you like to join it? Yes. It's usually like, give it a few minutes, and usually it's like 30 seconds, and you can do update, and it'll come through. Yeah, you're right. So, yeah, I just find, like I said, this stuff is just, it's not necessarily wrong for the criticism. I just find it so low on the totem pole of things to be complaining about, but outrage works. So I'm sure they got a lot of traffic on that, and congratulations. But I'm not buying that this is a really serious issue. I think there are other serious security concerns. I think if you really want to write an article like what we were just talking about, all apps do that pop-up thing, especially on mobile devices. You're right that the review system for stores and the incentives seems to be broken, as well as just like outdated almost. It's a very antiquated way.
This is along the same vein, but like people getting annoyed when Microsoft advertises its own services in its own OS.
Yeah.
That I don't understand. Like I did the 23H2 video recently, and I obviously mentioned the new settings homepage, and I mentioned how you can view your Microsoft 365 subscription there and whatnot. And I said that's pretty cool. You can just sort of see an overview of your subscription stats and stuff. The comments were like, "Oh, you think an ad's cool in the settings app? God damn it! This is Microsoft's own platform. They're allowed. Get out of here. I think it's cool that you can see your OneDrive set storage in the settings app. Get out of here. What is wrong with you?"
And those same clowns will then praise Apple for all its integration of its services.
It's shocking, isn't it? It's shocking.
That's why Apple's better, because they integrate everything so well. It's so flawless. Microsoft tries it. Oh, it's an ad. Meanwhile, God bless Samsung. I love the Samsung phones. Samsung phones are all about going, by the way, Samsung. Have you tried the Samsung this? Have you tried the Samsung that? Have you tried our Samsung browser? Every day you're getting like a new, like, hi, we're Samsung. Have you tried our Samsung this? It's just like, it's all over the place. It's like, it's annoying, but I get it. And sometimes, like, I used to, I was like, oh, the Samsung browser. Then I tried the Samsung browser. I'm like, damn, it's actually a really good web browser. Like, I mean, first of all, it has the address bar at the bottom. Like, I was immediately like, all right, that's a win. It was fast. And then they allow plugins. I'm like, wow, Samsung actually does well. But sometimes there is like, that works sometimes, and I actually appreciate it. I'm like, all right, let me try this thing. I'm bored. I'm waiting in the dentist's office. Let me finally try what you're trying to sell me. And I try. I'm like, oh, actually, it's kind of cool. But yeah, you're right. I mean, consumer education is really hard the more complicated technology gets. It's not like when you get Windows 11 and you install it on a computer, it's your first time on Windows 11. The computer boots up and like a short film starts, like, hello, like the 1950s films. Welcome to Windows 11, your new operating system. And then it's like an hour long of them walking through a tutorial about all the new stuff. First of all, no one would watch that. People would complain, right? So they had to be careful with balancing the out-of-box experience, delivering knowledge about new features without like driving you nuts. It's a tough thing, but like when you have this many intricate services and new apps and things. We're talking about that with I even forgot the name of it now. Microsoft's new like online apps. What was the creator ones?
Designer.
I don't remember the names. Designer. Yeah, but most basic name. Like even with Designer, like we had to write an article like what is Designer? And even actually if you ask me what Designer is right now, I'd still kind of struggle with it. Like it's not like they're running commercials for Designer, right? So it's like, how do you get people to know about this thing, which for a lot of people would actually be very helpful and solve problems for them? It's hard, man.
One of the things I've heard they're working on for the next version of Windows is going to anger so many people because this is okay. You must understand the new Windows leadership team is basically the Bing and services team. Okay. Services being Microsoft 365, and that includes Designer and Clipchamp and everything. Their goal is to make people use those services a lot. And so we're going to see more of this, I think, in the future and not less. And I think we're going to start seeing it more prominently in places like File Explorer and maybe even the Start menu. So get used to it, guys, because they want you to use those things and they're going to put it in your face.
The Verge can start pre-writing those articles now. How the Bing team ruined Windows, Yeah, I'm one of those people too. I like MSN News. I like the news stuff. I do get the concern, like people are like, it gives them stories they don't want, but like I've configured it, done the thumbs up, turn off, and I've done it. And I'm not saying it's high level genius news I'm getting, but it is my favorite like time wasting news where I learn about new TV shows. I learn about weird movie trivia. Like, here's the thing that happened on the Alien set in 1979 that you didn't know about. Like, do I need to know that? No. Do I want to know that? Yes, I do. And like when I'm bored and just want some mindless stuff, I love the MSN News. I click it all the time. I'm guilty of it. So sorry. I get though, if someone doesn't want to use it and they want more serious news and all that, it could definitely be improved. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I don't know. I like a lot of this stuff. So
my favorite thing about MSN News is the thumbs up, thumbs down counter. I love how they have the thumbs down counter and it's so like open.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there's 105,000 thumbs down on that article. Cool.
Yeah, and then they have the comments, their own comment system for their own articles. But like I'll say it again.
Is it
the MSN stuff? Huh? Yeah, it's through your Microsoft account.
Oh, wow,
yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, I know, right? But I tell you, the benefit of MSN News is like you can get articles from Washington Post or Wall Street Journal or whatever that's behind a paywall. You can get those articles full on MSN News, and there's like no ads. You can get the black, dark background, white text, so it's easy to read. Uh, like it's all streamlined and stripped out of stuff. Like it's a better reading experience than, a lot of the web is. And like, a lot of times you see a story, oh, Wall Street Journal, click it. Oh, you need a paywall, MSN, not for every story, but for a lot of the big stories that get into it, yeah, you can then go read the article for free. I think that's pretty cool. I don't know.
I, I'm
That's me.
I'm actually flabbergasted. But I'm just looking at the comment system here. There, people are
Yeah,
commenting on these articles, and but you can click
there's a
into
lot.
people's profiles, and like they have followers and stuff. Microsoft has a secret social network here. They've got
Yes,
this
yeah.
guy here has 31,000 comments and 52,000 likes. What the? This is insane.
Yep.
And you can follow them if you want. I had no idea this was even part of MSN. What the hell?
Yeah,
I
we
thought it
should
was
do
like
an article about it.
anonymous commenting. This is just nuts. Oh well.
Yeah, and it's like if you go on articles, there's a lot of comments. Like it's used. I mean, that's the funny thing with MSN. It's like you could argue whether or not it's good for society or
Oh yeah,
democracy,
right,
I
yeah.
suppose. Like that is a separate but related discussion. That's probably that's accurate. But like, yeah, people do use it. It's popular because it's like it's one of the highest, the most trafficked pages on the internet. Partly because it's often the default page for, Edge and previously Internet Explorer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a reason why like Microsoft kind of makes money on that stuff and is pushing it. But anywho, all right, that does that for that little ranto. Let's go to another rant and talk about the Snapdragon X Elite, one of our favorite topics. Actually, this article did extremely well on the site this week. Patting myself on the back for it. So we talked a lot about this last week on the last podcast. So I won't go recap everything regarding a new Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite platform that's coming to Windows PC. Supposedly mid 2024, though Zach is hearing that, I believe you said April, May.
Yeah, I think we might start seeing the first PC start shipping late May, early June.
Okay, which would make sense. So, there were a lot of questions about the performance. Qualcomm made comments on stage, they had graphs, they did call out specific processors, which was nice, way better than Apple does. And they made bold claims, which, as I keep reminding people, they can't lie about. If you lie about stuff on stage in public and make claims and they're not true, your own investors can sue you for fraud. Like it's literally the definition of fraud. You're getting up on stage promising a product that doesn't do the thing you're saying it can do. Not to mention the FTC can actually sue you too. Then there's two other laws that could be sued under. So they can't get on stage and make false claims. But then they went further, and on that Thursday, they actually held a benchmarking session where the press could show up. They gave us the range. I still have the paper in front of me here because I don't clean my desk with all the ranges for the benchmarks. And then they had all the reference design PCs there where we could then run those benchmarks in real time as many times as we wanted and collect all the data and talk to the engineers behind it, which again, no one's done that before, certainly not Apple. Granted, Apple got to ship their laptops within 2 weeks, so we're going to get the benchmarks anyway. But still, people didn't want to believe the results. They were like, "No way, no way!" And then a lot of people also had the all. I had people going so bold, like, "That's great. All of it will be meaningless next week when Apple announces the M3." Like, really? Like, it's just meaningless now. That's pretty bold. And I was like, that's a question that needs to be answered. We don't know how these are going to perform. So now we do. The results have come out, at least so there's really two main benchmarks to use here. One is Geekbench 6, which is both optimized for Apple Silicon and Qualcomm Silicon, as well as x86. So they're platform neutral, and they measure just raw CPU power without the GPU. There's actually a separate GPU test it can do, but the main one is CPU. And then there's Cinebench, Oh, the other cool thing about Geekbench, it actually runs on phones and tablets too. So you can literally compare it to everything that's out there in the market, which is always kind of fun. In other words, we can eventually compare Surface Pro 10 running on Snapdragon X Elite to the latest iPad Pro and actually get real head-to-head benchmarks. There's also Cinebench Cinebench 2024, which is brand new and it's been optimized for, again, Apple and Qualcomm and also x86. And again, platform neutral, so you can do head-to-head stuff. So what came out this week were a lot of the Geekbench scores, and the results are really fascinating. Now, Apple M3 Max did very well. It's a very powerful chip. There is no argument about it. It has 16 cores, 12 of which are performance, 4 are efficiency. I should mention the single core performance on Apple's chips, M3, M3 Pro, M3 Max, are all basically the same. It's on Geekbench, they all score basically 3,000 points, give or take. 3,070, sometimes 3,100, sometimes 2,940. A lot of this is dependent upon every time you run that test, you're going to get slightly different numbers, some up, some down. It depends on your thermal conditions. Are you doing benchmarking in a cold room? Are you doing it on a hot summer day? All that, all those little changes will totally. Are you running them multiple times in a row? Then you're increasing the heat. You're probably going to decrease your score, right? So all this stuff technically matters. It's in with the variation range, which is why when Qualcomm gave us the sheet, they actually gave us the ranges of the low and the high of what they did, which was cool. All right, so let's go. What's the next one? Apple M3 Pro. Again, 3,000 score for the single core. On multi-core, I got 15,173. It's a very good score. What did the Snapdragon X Elite with the 80-watt device TDP? I'll touch upon that again because people are still screwing it up. So it got 2,940. So a 60-point difference, give or take. But again, this is literally within the range of error for most of these. And it got 15,130 for multi-core. So 15,130 versus 15,173. I can tell you, you're not going to feel that difference. That is, and if you look at the charts, it's dead even. You're talking, these are within the range of error, meaning that if you ran Apple M3 Pro a couple more times, some of those scores may drop below the Snapdragon X Elite and vice versa, right? It's going to go back and forth, but they're effectively dead even. That's really impressive. A lot of people are like, oh, the M3, because Qualcomm does consider the Snapdragon X Elite a competitor to the M2, not necessarily the M3 Pro or the Max, but here it is going head to head with the M3 Pro in terms of just raw CPU performance. In terms of efficiency, we don't technically know because Apple is very cagey on theirs. They said efficiency, what was it? I think it's 50% more efficient compared to M1 when running at M1's peak speed, if that makes sense. So it's not, so M3 runs at a higher speed. So if you're going to bump up that speed, that efficiency drops down, right? It's not going to be 50%. It'll be more like 40 or 30% because now you're running a higher speed. But if you made them run at the same speed, which is the M1's peak speed, it's 50% more efficient, which is not trivial. It's a big thing. How does it compare to the M2? We don't know. Like, how do you do that percentage change? I don't know. You can kind of base it on like when they announced the M2, how it compared to the M1. You know, it's a 20% savings. Like you can kind of figure something out there, but it's going to be all wishy-washy, right? And then, you know, Qualcomm, they compared theirs. Again, it was the Snapdragon X Elite running single core when it matched the peak performance of the M2 was 30% more efficient, right? So why are they doing single core? Well, because it's easier to measure the efficiency of a single core. Presumably, when you add up all the other cores, especially since on the Snapdragon, they're all the same cores except for two that can burst higher. You know, Apple's has efficiency cores, but efficiency cores, you don't want to compare to an efficiency core because by definition, the efficiency core is clocked lower. And so, of course, it saves battery. It's literally the point of it, right? So you compare the two like main cores, the main performance cores, and see how they perform against each other. What does that mean for battery life, though? Who knows? It's like, let's go through the variables of determining battery life. This is why you compare battery life on laptops, not necessarily processors, right? Um, you can sometimes do the processor, the power draw, but even that is going to vary from device to device on Snapdragon X Elite because that's the point of it. It's a flexible TDP, so they can adjust the power thing. So it's going to battery life depends on your display size, your display resolution. Is it touchscreen? It's going to depend on your RAM. What type of RAM? Is it DDR5? Is it LPDDR5? Is it LPDDR5 5600? Is it LPDDR5 6000? Is it higher than that? All that, the higher that number goes, the faster the RAM is, the more power it's going to use. It depends on your storage. Is it PCIe 3, PCIe 4? How big is the drive in there? All that matters as well. It's going to matter on your GPU. Is your GPU being used all the time? How efficient is your GPU? Then it matters on your cooling system. Do you have heat pipes? Do you have two fans, three fans, no fans? Passive cooling, closed cooling, like all because as the chip gets hotter, it could slow down. It could save your battery life technically, right? But all this stuff. Oh, also, of course, the biggest one. What's the battery size? Do you have a huge battery, small battery, tiny battery? So, saying which chip is more efficient here is going to be a really kind of complicated task. I'm sure we'll get some if people can figure out the actual TDP draw on the chips for Qualcomm, which they have not announced yet, but you'd have to do that on a per device thing because a Surface Pro 10's TDP power draw will be lower than a 15-inch laptop using Qualcomm that has two fans in it and a large battery. It's just going to be a different power draw. So we don't know. It's supposed to be more efficient, though, than the M2. That's really what we need to know, right? Um, and then, of course, there's the Snapdragon X Elite with the 23-watt TDP. And that one falls behind the M3 single core. So it's 2,780. It's actually a little bit higher than that if you use Qualcomm score, whereas the Apple M3 could go all the way up to 3,100. So there is definitely I would say, a significant, not significant, but there is definitely a difference in performance there. Whether you would feel that or not, I'm not really too sure, but there is a difference in performance there. However, the bigger gap comes down to the multi-core performance because Apple M3 only has 8 cores. X Elite has 12 cores. So the Qualcomm is 14,000 on this, whereas the M3 is 11,211. That flat out means, putting aside the single core score, you don't run single core when you're running your computer. You run multi all the time. Flat out, that means that a laptop, even at the 23-watt device TDP, will absolutely crush the M3, I would say. That's a big difference. 14,000 versus 11,000, that's a big difference in a score. That's going to be like, you'll see that in actual real life workloads, like, measured in seconds and stuff like that. And then I'll address finally the thing that people always, well, yeah, the M3 only has 8 cores. That's why you should compare it to the M3 Pro because it's got 12 cores, which we just did, and it's a dead even thing. But I've said before, cores are only one part of a chip's design that matters. Like, I don't know how you think cores would be the primary difference when you haven't even talked about, I don't know, the speed of the chip. When did the speed of the chip become irrelevant to this discussion? Should we not mention that one chip runs at 4.05 gigahertz and the other one peaks at 4.2 gigahertz? Like, is that not relevant to a performance discussion, people? Come on. What about memory considerations? Apple has a unified memory system, which plays a part in its performance, and then Qualcomm has its memory thing. There's also GPU, which I guarantee, yeah, Apple's new M3 will beat the Qualcomm's GPU. What does that matter for real world stuff? Well, it depends on what you're doing, I suppose, right? So there's a lot of factors that go in here. I think, though, the bottom line is, and I can't believe people are detracting from this, is Qualcomm did a freaking outstanding job here. I think people were ever since we were talking about this stuff, people are like, oh, they want to beat the M1, because that's when it first came out with Nuvia and all this, but what about they're going to be on M2 or even M3 by the time it comes out? Will they be able to compete there? And it's just yeah, it's a good question. Which one are they targeting? And it turns out they were targeting M2, and they went above and beyond beating M2. It absolutely beats the M2. And then everybody, of course, when they announced these benchmarks, were like, yeah, but the M3 is going to be out, making this completely irrelevant, which of course it doesn't. And then the M3 comes out, and it's like, oh, look, it actually the 80 watt TDP device TDP goes up against it, and matches it dead even. Now, I should also mention the 23 and 80 watt TDP thing, because that is still confusing. I'll reiterate. This is device TDP. That is a thermal design power. So 80 watt or 23 watt. That is not, I repeat, not the power draw of the processor. It is not drawing 80 watts for the processor. TDP isn't even always a measure of the power draw. It's called thermal design power, right? Thermal. That's a key word, thermal, because it is the wattage of power that when you're building a thermal cooling system for that device that you need to target. The idea is that it'll be 80 watts of heat generated when the CPU, GPU, RAM, SSD, other controllers on the device are all running in full together. That total number is the cooling you need to aim for. You can discern from that the one that has an 80 watt device TDP does draw more power than a 23 watt TDP. You can absolutely make that conclusion, because I think that's obvious. What you can't discern from this conclusion is what the CPU TDP is, the actual CPU power draw. We have no idea. We have no idea what the difference is between those two systems, because Qualcomm has not stated it publicly. As to why they haven't, I believe it's because they're 8 months out from shipping this, and they're still optimizing things, which is it's not like they're just sitting there like they wrapped it up. they're like, let's just wait 8 months and we'll start putting this in hardware. They're still finishing it. They're still optimizing drivers. They're optimizing hardware. My guess is they know they can probably get the power draw even lower or tweak it, the ranges for it. And when they're ready, they'll probably announce, what that is. It's going to come out eventually anyway when people rip it apart, right? So there's that thing. But right now we don't know the difference in power draw. We know the M3 I think is 35 watt, so it goes up to like 35 watts. But you throw in the GPU, it goes up to like 79 watts, right? So we don't know. But stop saying that, like, well, in order for the Snapdragon chip to compete against the M3 Pro, it's got to run at 80 watts versus the 35. That is if you're saying that, you're being a moron. And I get it. It's confusing. I was new to device TDP versus chip TDP as well, but it is a distinction. It's a valid distinction. So, but you can't say that, like, oh my God, the M3 is going to be way more efficient because of that. When especially since Qualcomm said on stage, the Snapdragon X Elite, when matched for peak performance to the M2, is 30% more efficient. That should tell you the power draw for the Qualcomm one, at least compared to the M2 series, is more efficient and draws less power. I think that's the conclusion. Do we need more data? Of course. We always need more data. I should also mention, technically, this is all fanboy service. This is fan bait, what I call it, which is why I wrote it, because it is fan bait. We've taken it for years from Apple about their processors and their fans, about how good their chips are. And credit where credit's due. They just, I mean, that's fair. It was a fair ragging point. But when you're going to go buy a laptop, most people already know they're going to buy a Windows laptop. In fact, if you had an Acer laptop and you really enjoyed it, probably a pretty good chance as a buyer, just knowing psychology, you're going to go look at the latest Acer laptops. If you bought a Surface and you really like Surface and you're like, oh, I love this Surface. Oh, there's a new one out. You're probably going to go buy the new Surface. Very, very few people on this planet will actually be like, oh, I've had PC for 5 years or 8 years or 10 years. I'm going to go grab the latest MacBook. Some people will. Some people can afford to do that. But a lot of people won't, because it's a pain in the butt. So it's like the real target here is not Apple. It's actually Intel, followed by AMD. But they really want to go after Intel. Intel controls the majority of the laptop market. And I just had a discussion with an OEM 2 days ago. We'll talk about them next week because they have a new laptop coming out. But I don't want to give anything away. It's just not a consumer thing. We'll just say it's that. But I asked them about ARM, and they flat out said, "Listen, we're an Intel house." And what they
Yeah.
mean by that, and they stated, is that they work very closely with Intel.
Yep.
Uh, and I've said this before, Intel R&D, they help them design the laptops. They work with them on thermals. They pay sometimes for the promotions and all this kind of stuff. Intel has their claws in deep. Qualcomm really wants to dethrone Intel or at least take that market share from them. When we compare Qualcomm to Apple, it's literally just for the fans, the nerds out there who just want drama. And I'm happy to deliver that. I think it's also interesting, though, because there's a narrative out there. Apple was just like miles and years ahead of everybody else. And here, this story changes that. And I think that's important. But yeah, I've talked a lot. Zach, I'm sorry. Do you have any thoughts about this stuff or ideas you want to share?
No, I mean I fully agree with your analysis on this. I think a lot of people are just like the pun intended, I guess, the apples to apples comparison of an ARM chip versus an ARM chip. Before we were doing Intel versus ARM, and it's a less of an apples to apples comparison. But with Qualcomm now in the ring, and as you say, like the X Elite is trading punches with the M2 Pro, it's no longer this cut and dry. Oh, Apple wins and it's better than everything else. Also, going back to your point on people, if you're a fan of Surface, you likely buy a Surface. If you're a fan of a Dell, you'll likely buy a new Dell. If you're a fan of a Mac, you'll buy a new Mac. There were very few people who were a fan of silicon. People weren't
Right.
I want to buy the new Mac because of Apple silicon. Very few people were like that for sure. And I foresee that being the case here with Qualcomm. Just because they do have a chip now that rivals Apple Silicon, I don't think is going to convince many people to upgrade from an Intel 11th gen or 12th gen laptop. I think those laptops are still very good for what they are, and people will continue to use them for many years to come. Even though in 6 months we're getting amazing Snapdragon X Elite processors in laptops, I don't think people are going to be like, oh, I need to have an X Elite laptop now. You and me, Mike, the diehard technology enthusiasts, but normal people certainly aren't chasing new hardware because of updated silicon. They just aren't. I think this it's good that Qualcomm is in the ring now, and they do have a chip that trades punches. I don't think it's that big of a deal in regards to competing with Mac, only because Mac users are Mac users, and they're going to keep using Mac regardless of how good Windows PC chips are. And I think the same can be said the other way. I fully tried to use macOS when Apple Silicon first came out. Cannot stand macOS. Don't like the hardware, really. The Apple Silicon stuff was great, I admit, great battery life, etc., etc. But all the other things surrounding that I didn't enjoy made me not want to use that laptop. So I think the same will continue to be that for people. People aren't going to want to get a Windows PC as a Mac user because they have better chips now. It's just, but Windows PCs in regards to hardware have been better than Macs for a long time in regards to function, at least, like be 5G, 2-in-1, etc., etc. I would argue the Dell XPS 13 from a hardware perspective is a better laptop than a MacBook Air. I just think it is. It's got a touchscreen, fantastic OLED screen, this, that, and the other. But that doesn't mean Mac users want to buy an XPS 13. There's more to it than that. It's not just about the silicon. It's not just about the hardware. It's also about the software. It's about the support network around you as well. Apple does a very good job at ecosystem and support. Like their Apple stores everywhere. You can walk into any Apple store, and if you have a problem with an Apple product, they will service you in there. You can't do that with a Dell laptop, right? You can't do that with PCs in general. But there are other advantages to PCs that I think a lot of people value over being able to walk into an Apple store. So, it's different for different people. But I think the silicon part is, no one cares. Not many people care about that, to be honest. I think that's very purely fanboys and technology enthusiasts. Everybody else couldn't give less of a monkey about it, to be honest.
Yeah. I just want to address some funny comments from Andrew B, who says, well, for one thing, this doesn't matter until it ships, which that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Of course it matters. We're in the business of covering technology. We just talked about the next version of Windows. Should we not talk about things that are coming down the road because it's not here? Why, Zach, why even bother telling us about the next version of Windows? It's not here today. Why do we care? Should we not talk about Surface Pro 10? Should we not talk about new technologies that are coming out, like that new passive fan system that's making what's it called? The Aerojet, I think it's called. Should we not talk about that? Because it's not here today. We're covering tech. The whole thing we do is about talking about things that are coming. And 6 months out is not that far if you think about it. I would also, and then the other thing is like, oh, by the time it comes out, we'll be talking about M4. We'll be talking about M4. So it's okay to talk about M4, but we can't talk about the new Qualcomm chip. Where do you look at yourself in the mirror and understand logic? Do you just like, I don't know how this works in your brain. That makes no sense to me. Why would we talk about the M4 when we're just got a ban on talking about Qualcomm because it's not here? But we can talk about the M4 even though it's not here. Doesn't matter anyway. Yeah, I'm sure the M4 is going to come out and it'll be powerful. Guess what? Qualcomm will also be working on new chips. This is one SKU for them, just one. Apple has 3 SKUs based on different cores. Qualcomm has not scaled up its cores yet. They have 12 cores. They can easily do 16 cores and then 20 cores. They could also go down to 8 cores and 4 cores. When they go up to 16 cores, they could call it, they won't, but they could call it the Qualcomm Snapdragon X Pro. And then they can make the Snapdragon X Max at the 20. That's what they're probably going to do. That's the whole point of RISC-based and ARM-based chips is they're easy to scale up. The M series from Apple is literally the A series that were in its phones scaled up. That's just the nature of this technology. And Qualcomm was pretty transparent that that's going to be the plan here. This is just the first one that they're doing. Apple already has 3 for the M3. Qualcomm, when they scale up, I guarantee is going to probably beat them because we've already seen when they add more cores, their cores are more powerful and they have first of all performance cores, no efficiency cores. So their multi-core performance is naturally going to be better because they have all their cores performing at performance. Like that's when I'm talking about architecture and design, that's what matters. Like if you don't use efficiency cores by design run at a lower gigahertz and consume less power. That's the whole point of them. So if you have 4 of them out of a 16 core chip, when you're running multi-core and you're running all 16, well, 4 of those are going to kind of suck and drag you down. If you're running 16 all performance cores, guess what? You're going to win because you have all your cores running. The other thing is he says it doesn't matter because Qualcomm doesn't have a license for ARM. Oh, he's calling me a fanboy. Yeah, okay, because your argument sucks. He says Qualcomm doesn't have a license from ARM. See, this is, again, just being a clown. There is a lawsuit that ARM has filed against Qualcomm claiming that parts of the Nuvia the Nuvia platform, or actually it's going to be the Orion processor, part of that infringes upon designs from ARM. That's the allegation. Does Qualcomm need a license from ARM to ship these? No. ARM is trying to get an injunction to prevent them. There's been no progress on this case. Nothing has been decided yet. There is currently no requirement from Qualcomm to get a license from ARM to ship these chips. It's up to the courts to decide that. Now, that could be the case. It could be they could win the injunction. Maybe, maybe not. This also could be the fact that Qualcomm has stated that they want to move away from ARM. And Qualcomm is one of the biggest customers of ARM. So it makes sense that ARM is going to try to get money out of them somehow. Now, if a court says, hey, guess what, Qualcomm, you are infringing upon some of the technology from ARM, well, then they'll hammer out a license, just like, I don't know, Apple does this all the time with Qualcomm too. But that's the case right now. They don't need the license. It's alleged they need the license. 2 separate things. So don't confuse those. When that court case happens, we can revisit this. But right now, you can't say that. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, and look, just to add comment some more high level about this whole idea of you shouldn't speculate and stuff. I think that's total BS. Speculation's fun. We should be allowed to talk about things that we don't know the answers to fully. And in this case, it doesn't even make sense because we sort of already have numbers for these chips. It's not like we're imagining what the performance of this processor is going to be like. We know what it's going to be like. We've seen Qualcomm benchmark it. In front of Dan, they gave him access to a laptop and he pressed benchmark and he benchmarked a reference design laptop, which is basically a design that Qualcomm expects OEMs to sort of be similar to, I guess, is a fair way to say it. Like this laptop is an example laptop for all the kind of laptops that will be coming with this chip. That's what they benchmarked, and so yeah, I think speculation is fun. I think it's good that we do have these benchmarks because we can, at the very least, understand that this chip will at least perform X way in a laptop. That's very similar to, let's say, a MacBook Pro, and that's
Which along that same lines, I had people say that like, yeah, but I want real world comparisons and performance. It's like, listen, we know it can beat, what was it, the GT77 MSI laptop. It's a 7.4-pound gaming laptop running Intel's Core i9 HX series processor. The HX series is different from the other Core processors. It is literally Intel's desktop processor modified, brought down to the laptop. It's different from the H series. HX is a different level. It's the most powerful chip that they make for mobile. It's only used in very expensive workstations and very high-end gaming laptops. When the when Qualcomm's chip can beat it in some scores, I think it was in multi-core. I forgot what it was, either single core or multi-core. Regardless, you got an idea like the performance. Like it's going to be fast. Like I don't know what more do you like. Even let's take the HX out of there. Let's just talk about it's going to destroy the H series, like a 45-watt Intel H series chip, right? In terms of performance, like if you're going to a 13-inch Ultrabook or 14-inch Ultrabook and you're going to have that processor in there, that's a lot of power. I mean, that's exactly what Apple's doing. It's going to be the same experience. I don't know what more comparisons you need. It's going to be fast. And that also gets into the emulation thing. People are like, why didn't you talk about emulation? Like, well, we didn't get to try emulation. I will say, though, Apple's Rosetta 2 also takes a performance hit. I believe when it came out on the M1, there was it ran at 78 to 79% efficiency performance compared to native apps, and that was going according to Mac Rumors had that. So there's an overhead loss when you run Rosetta 2 for translating x86 apps to ARM. The difference was the M1 was so powerful that it still felt great. The problem with the Snapdragon 8CX was always like, even at its best, it was still behind Intel's mid-range. So if you're running all ARM native, it felt fine and felt fast sometimes even, especially with the OS and everything. But when you ran x86, now the performance could drop down to, I don't know what the comparison would be, but below an i3, then you would really feel it. But if you're running at like H or HX level for native, and then you go to emulate an app, if I had to guess, Core i7 P series, like it's going to be the performance. Like you're not going to really notice it. It's the same way you don't really notice it on an Apple device, because when the chip is that powerful, any loss of overhead from the efficiency loss of doing the conversion, you don't feel it. That's the difference. So I'm not really worried about emulation. And don't forget, it's not like apps don't run in emulation for x86. I think people still have this idea that like some x86 apps don't run, but they do. It's just a performance issue, but this addresses that. So.
Yeah. Right, we should really move on to our next topic.
Yes.
Because we've got to drag on otherwise. That's okay, it's totally fine. Steam Deck, right? Let's talk a bit about the Steam Deck. There have been rumors for some time, and Dan can get into more detail about what these rumors really were, that a Steam Deck 2 was on the way. Steam Deck, the original's been out for a couple of years now. I think it came out in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been out for a little while. Obviously, there have been some competitors who have joined the fray since, who have are shipping arguably better hardware. I guess that's up for debate. Dan can maybe say something on that in a minute, because he does have competing hardware on him. But this week, Valve announced the Steam Deck OLED, which is a slight update to the original Steam Deck. It's not a Steam Deck 2, as many people were sort of assuming it might be. It's more of a revision to the original Steam Deck. And the main one, of course, is it now has an OLED screen versus an LCD. I believe it also has faster SSD storage in the form of a 512 gig option and a new 1 terabyte option. Yeah, I mean, the original one was available in 64, 256, and 512 gig options. So the 1 terabyte edition will be really nice for those who load up their Steam Deck with a whole bunch of different games. 1 terabyte should easily get you a whole bunch of PC games on there just fine. The display is now able to go up to 90 hertz versus 60 on the original. And as I mentioned, it is OLED, so colors should be a lot more punchy versus the old LCD screen. It's still only 720p, which yuck. I know I was never a fan of the original one being 720p, and this one is still 720, so that's a bit disappointing, because I know like the Legion Go has at least 1080, right? I think the Asus ROG Ally is also 1080. Am I mistaken? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Dan, you've had an opportunity to try all of these. What are your thoughts on Steam Deck versus the newer ones, and is this OLED upgrade worth it for Steam Deck buyers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I haven't tried the OLED version, which is fascinating because they didn't just switch out the screen. It went from a 7-inch screen to a 7.4-inch display, so they made it larger, which is really nice. So the borders, should be thinner on this, the bezels basically. So that's really nice. And what's crazy is it's the exact same chassis. It's the same size device. They didn't like change that. So they put in a bigger display. It actually has a larger battery as well. But because of the components of the display, it weighs less. So it's like, yeah, so there's all sorts, and they also put in Wi-Fi 6E.
Oh, good.
Which is not trivial. Yeah, that's not trivial. Well, no, I mean, for considering it does a lot of online gaming, right? If you have Wi-Fi 6 router, which you need that to make it work, but the packet analysis for that is much more optimized for gaming than Wi-Fi 5. So I think it also has Bluetooth 5.3, I want to say. I think it has a new Bluetooth too, which makes sense. They usually come in pairs. I think it's a cool upgrade, but this is also very Nintendo, right? Nintendo did this with the Switch. There's always, they're coming out the Switch 2 and all this. And then they came out with one that was the Lite, right? And, you can't take the controllers off, which actually I preferred. It was a much more sturdy device. And then people were like, the Switch 2 is coming out. And then it was like OLED. And then that rumor came and went. Then finally, boom, they just dropped the Switch with OLED. And it's been a pretty awesome device. So they did that here as well. So we know Steam Deck 2 is going to come out, but that's going to be a big overhaul in terms of performance, new APU and all that. Also, the CPU switches. It goes from it's the same type, but instead of 4 nanometer, I believe it's 3 nanometer. So that also helps with all that stuff, including battery life. I think it's a cool change. Would I drop my current Steam Deck for it? Well, I'm tempted, but I haven't really turned on my Steam Deck in months, so probably not a good idea. I will say there is a screen. You can do your own upgrade if you're brave enough to go into open up your Steam Deck. You can upgrade the display for it. It's called hold on. Here it is. It is called Steam Deck. Oh no, It is called Deck HD, all one word. It costs $99. This will only work on the original Steam Deck, of course, but it has a 1920 by 1200 resolution, Zach. So this one actually does increase the resolution for you, which is kind of cool. It's also more color accurate, which is really nice too. It has deeper blacks. So if you have an existing Steam Deck and you're okay with working on hardware, spending $99 for Deck HD, I think was a cool option. You'll actually get a higher resolution. You're not going to get OLED, but it's still, I think, a better option than maybe selling off your device. So I think Steam is literally the Nintendo here, because Nintendo Switch's hardware profile was always terrible. And the device itself is not great. But like, they just locked in that ecosystem. And so because of that, it just it locks people in. And compared to the ROG Ally, the ROG Ally kills the Steam Deck in a lot of ways. It is much better performer in terms of everything, from a lot of times the storage, the CPU, the overall performance. They're both 7-inch displays. You're right. The Steam Deck was 1280 by 800. Even the new version is. The ROG Ally is 1920 by 1080, so it's higher resolution. Plus, it's a variable refresh display that goes up to 120 hertz, but it can change between 60 and 120. The battery life not as good, but it's not that big of a difference either. For me, ROG Ally is still the one to beat. It is the performance on it is great. The display is better. I think the OLED will be better with the Steam Deck, but then you're right, you're going down to a slightly lower resolution. Um, but I would go with the ROG Ally. Then you have to go, okay, what about the Legion Go? Um, the Legion Go from Lenovo is brand new, and I have that too. So, all right, specs on that. Same processor. I can tell you though, and we'll have this in our review, the Legion Go does not perform as well as the ROG Ally. I presume that may be on purpose to get more battery life out of it. It's something that Lenovo can control, but we'll have the benchmarks up to compare, and Rebecca will make that argument clearer. But that seems to be the case. The performance isn't as good. The display, though, is a pretty big difference. Instead of a 7-inch Full HD, you're going to an 8.8-inch QHD, so 2560 by 1600. And it goes up to 144 hertz, but it's not variable refresh. In other words, you do 60 or 144, but you don't do in between. Plus the controllers snap off of the Legion Go, and it has a kickstand baked in. And one of those controllers then can switch into like a mouse controller for use with first-person shooters. I really, 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 really like the hardware of the Legion Go. I think it's great. That large display, man, and that kickstand, you put that kickstand and then you put it in your lap, it really takes the weight off of like having to hold it up. It's really kind of cool. And then you can just use your hands on the controller. I love the display. I know some people have complained because they're reusing their Android tablet display, and they said it's like, oh, there's some like artifacts or ghosting here. I haven't noticed it. It just looks gorgeous to me, and I love the size. 8.8-inch from 7-inch. That's a huge difference. The performance stuff I think is valid. I also don't love Lenovo's software. I can't believe I'm saying Asus did a better job of software, but they did. They did. The Asus ROG Ally software is actually really pretty good on it. It works. It's reliable. I've had issues with the Legion Goes. Like, for instance, I have games in my library, and when you go look at the thumbnail, it's the wrong game. It's like, really? And I don't know how to fix it. The performance is an issue. Both have abilities you hit these buttons and side menus pop up, including during your game, to give you quick access to features like changing the refresh rates, changing the performance, turning on Bluetooth, all that kind of stuff. The ROG Allies works flawlessly. The Lenovo Go, sometimes you hit it, nothing happens. You have to hit it twice. It's just weird and quirky. The good news is Lenovo can fix that. That's just software they can optimize. So I'm hopeful they do, because I really like its hardware. But the ROG Ally is the more polished of these devices right now. It's the more performance of the devices right now. It's the more flexible of the devices right now. Steam Deck's great if all you do is play Steam games, which for the most part, honestly, I did. But with going to the ROG Ally, I do pay for Xbox Game Pass, which means I could just download all the games I want. And this has the Xbox app you built in. And so you just go and you just download all the Xbox games too, So it's like having that flexibility, or you can run the Epic Store. It's much more flexible. So I actually I think the ROG Ally is the top device to get right now. I would keep an eye on Legion Go. I think it has a lot of potential, but it's not there yet. And Steam Deck, it's the Nintendo Switch, it's a great device. I mean, it's a great device, but yeah, you're making compromises both on performance, both on the display, and what you can do with it. You could install Windows 11 on it. You could do that. We have a guide, so if you want to. But out of the box, it's a Steam device, and you're going to run Steam games on it. So there you go. But you don't care because you don't play any of these. You just like sitting on your couch with the controller playing your Xbox on TV.
Yep. So big 65-inch TV, controller about 6-7 feet away from the display. I'm golden. That's me. Also, I like playing with
See that.
I have like a soundbar system with like bass and surround sound speakers. I just like the immersive sort of aspect to that verse. I don't know, you can sort of achieve the same thing with headphones and stuff and holding the screen close to your face, but I just prefer the comfort of a controller sitting on a couch, looking at a big telly. I don't know. I just do. I always have. And even when I was younger, I never bothered with things. I had a Nintendo DS and I had a PSP and stuff, but I was still
Mhm.
at heart an Xbox gamer and played most games on console if I had the opportunity to, because I just never felt comfortable. I just don't see the point in it if you're at home. you know.
Yeah, so I can explain. Well, first of all, I had the PSP too as well. And the reason I had that and why I liked it was simply because I was a projectionist. I would spend 10, 12
Yeah,
hours
yeah,
by
yeah.
myself in a projection booth.
Mhm.
Having that thing was pretty awesome. Like, like being able to play games, that
Yeah,
was, where I was at. As far as using it at home, I get the initial, yeah, why just go on your TV? I will say the more people you have in your house, the
that's
more
true.
it makes sense.
That's true. Yeah.
Because, and plus, I can sit on the couch, play this with the TV on with a significant other in the same room
Yeah, yeah.
and not get quite as yelled at as if I was to
Yeah.
take over the whole TV and just be gaming, or I use the other TV and was gaming in a completely separate room. Um, so that's the benefit there. But you're right, especially if you're a guy by yourself and you stay at home all the time, yeah, it doesn't really make sense to have one of these handhelds. But I think they do have their value, and they're really impressive now in terms of what they can do. I'll also give you one reason why you would never buy the Lenovo Legion Go, even if you had to buy one. And this one is kind of hurts me. No Windows Hello login.
Oh, is there hello on the Asus?
Asus has a fingerprint reader built into the
Oh,
power button.
yeah. That's a big deal.
It really is.
Yeah.
Like entering in my PIN.
Yeah, right.
Ew.
Yeah.
Like, would I just restart the device? It's like, yeah, it's really kind of gross. Like, I can't believe they didn't squeeze in a fingerprint reader. I'm not asking for the IR camera. I
No,
get
yeah,
that, but
yeah.
the fingerprint reader, really? Asus did, and then that convenience is kind of nice. So it's a toss up though. They're both. Listen, Lenovo at least did something different. They brought a completely different kind of experience and device to the market. I give them credit for that. It just needs refinement, where Asus surprisingly was a little bit better prepared out the gate, despite the fact that said, RRG Ally apparently fries literally can melt an SD card. If you run plugged in max 30 watts on a game for a long time and you have an SD card in there because of its placement, you can actually melt the SD card. So
Oh,
that's
good.
a
Yeah.
that's a flaw.
Yeah, yeah.
So keep that in mind too. But they're all works in progress. There you go. Anywho, I think that is long enough for the podcast. I apologize for the ranting, but I guess I had too much coffee again. It happens. Anyway, we'll be back next week for the podcast. As always, we do record this every Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern time on our YouTube channel at Windows Central. Sorry for last week's video not being up. It technically is. It's just not public. Zach will make it public again. The reason was we screwed up the beginning and we had to start over. So if you just start at the beginning, it's going to be weird. But we'll put it back up there for you guys if you want to watch. Anyway, follow me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, Rubino, also on Threads at the same address. Zach is ZACBOWDEN, both on Twitter and Threads as well. As always, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. Take care, everyone.
I can't believe your sound recording crashed.
I'm like 99%. Let me see. I'm pretty positive I ran out of. Yeah, I ran out of hard disk space.
What are you doing?
Wow. As of right now, I have 9 megabytes free. That's what it was.
You probably should delete some stuff.
You know what it was? I installed Alan Wake 2. Like I was going to play it. I want to play it, but I just don't have the time. And I don't know why it didn't install to my D drive.
Yeah.
But installed to my main drive. And yeah, I literally ran out of
How much storage do you have?
My main drive is only 500 gigs.
Oh, okay. That's more on the.
And my secondary drive is only 500 gigs. I'm reusing a lot of times on just laptop SSDs. So I need to invest into a 4 terabyte one and just go all in. But maybe for a Black Friday sale.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
All right. So if anyone has any questions in the chat, feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll hang around for a bit and do our best to try and provide some answers. Will the first core PC device be an ARM device? Will Windows be limited to a single user like iOS and iPadOS? Not too sure what the first core PC devices will be. They could be ARM devices. They may not be. I don't know. But will they be limited to a single user like iOS and iPadOS? I believe the answer is no. I think that's one of the key differences between Core OS and Core PC. Core OS was single user. It was one you were the single user. There was no multi-user support, at least not in the initial run. I think they were planning to add it down the line, but it wasn't there when Windows 10X was being finalized, almost it got cancelled, but you get what I mean. As Windows 11 10X was on the way to being done, it wasn't in the product for the first version. But I think Core PC does have multi-user. I think I need to get that double checked, but I'm pretty sure it does have multi-user. I think that's one of the key differences. So with the changes with Hudson Valley being a Windows 11 release, does that mean the refresh design tease is not happening? I would be surprised if it does. I think elements of it will appear, but I would be shocked if they do go all in and do like the floating dock with the system tray on the top of the screen and stuff. I think that's probably a bit too much for the new leadership team. They may get around to it, but I don't know if it's going to be Hudson Valley version 1. I think we might still see the floating search bar thing at the top of the screen, but the other elements I think are going to remain securely at the bottom. I could be wrong about that, don't quote me, but based on what I'm sort of understanding how things are going internally, I think that leaked concept was a Panos Panay thing, and I don't think the new leadership team are following that. Zach, are you going to do an article about the new Windows leadership team and their philosophy change? Philosophy change? Yes, I believe I am. I've been writing one. I'm still trying to get some details in it confirmed, because there's some elements to it that aren't public yet that I still need to sort of figure out if they are actually accurate or not. Things to do with like moment updates and other stuff. There's a lot to it, but yeah. Once I'm able to, actually, I can tell you how many words it is right now. I believe it's a long article. I've been writing it for a few days, and it's been revised like 2 times because I've changed half of it. Right now, the article is 1,257 words. I may have to.
How many words?
1,257.
Okay.
I may need to shrink it or cut some of this and save it for a different article. But yeah, I'm working on it. Zach, there's another project code named Neon that you promised to write or talk about. Did I? Which one? When did I promise that? And what was it in context to? Because yes, there were multiple projects codenamed Neon. Yeah. I don't know how much I can say about some of them. One of the projects codenamed Neon was a compatibility layer for Core PC, which, to my knowledge, allows legacy Win32 apps to run on Core PC with no performance degradation or very slight performance degradation. Like, it won't be noticeable to most people. Then there was another project, Neon, which was a Surface device, which is cancelled and not coming now, and it may have been able to fit in your pocket. I don't know. And then, is there a third Neon? I think there is a third Neon, but they're certainly not public, and I'm not talking about it. So, yeah, there's lots of Neon code names and stuff, but yeah, I think the other one I think I'll talk about was probably the Surface device, which is not coming now, so I won't be talking about it. I'm curious as to why Microsoft didn't tell customers that they delayed Windows 11 23H2 via Media Creation Tool. Do you think they should have been more prepared to release a new MCT upon release? Yeah, I don't think it's that they didn't tell customers. I think it's just that they forgot to update it. The problem with the enablement package method of doing things is that it really bloats the WIM file. It inflates the image itself, because it's no longer, these updates are sort of essentially applied on top versus slipstreamed into the OS. That's technically not accurate, but if you look at an ISO which has updates attached to it versus an ISO that doesn't have updates attached to it, the ISO that doesn't have updates attached to it is always smaller. I don't know how they get around doing that, but yeah, the enablement package method really bloats the WIM, the .wim file, and anything larger than 4 gigs won't fit on a USB key, so they need to figure out either shrink the WIM or split the WIM, which I think is what they usually do these days. And I think that just takes a bit for them to figure out how to put that in the Media Creation Tool.
Someone's asking about me and Linux. I can tell you, I'll just say no. And, but no, seriously, the question was, what was it? Am I paying attention to Linux ARM ecosystems as it compares to Apple and Qualcomm progress? I am not. Um, I don't see why Linux won't run on Qualcomm's chips, only because some of the benchmarks they initially shared were run on Linux, and that was done to be more equal footing. Um, that said, the benchmarks we saw in real life being benchmarked, like the 20 odd computers, that was running Windows 11. In fact, Zach thinks it's an unreleased version of Windows 11 because he hears that the new silicon requires updates in Windows 11 to optimize and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
that's right.
But I don't know. Linux, I honestly don't follow. I respect Linux. I think it's cool. If I wasn't at this job and I was just into computers, I'd probably be messing with Linux more. I mean, I did install Linux like in 2003, I want to say. I played around with it. Um, that was probably the last time. Richard Devine on our team is a big Linux fan. He actually does use it quite often and puts on his laptops and PCs. So, but we don't traditionally cover it on the sites. And that's partly just because I'm far, far from being an expert in it. I mean, I'm a complete novice these days, so I don't follow anything with Linux. But yeah,
Do you
sorry.
do you think Surface Pro's refresh is happening in the spring or the fall of next year? And would it be the first out of the gate with Elite? I don't know if it'll be the first. It'll be one of the first, but I don't know if Dell or Lenovo plans to beat them to it. But yeah, the Surface Pro will be one of the first, and to my knowledge, it will be spring next year. A late spring or
Man,
early summer is what I'm hearing. May, June timeframe.
telling you. I mean, I don't want to discount what HP, Lenovo, and Dell bring because we always discuss that. We think they always are making cool stuff, and we're kind of fans of HP around here lately. That said, like a Surface Pro 10 with this ARM chip, oh,
Yeah.
that's the dream chip, man. I'm telling you, like that's gonna be like that hardware. It's just gonna be kind of if that and I get 5G with it. Oh, that's gonna be a killer device.
Yeah. Well, with Hudson Valley being done in April, does this mean it might ship before September or October? Technically, yes, but it will depend on what you consider shipping. It will be shipping in the summer if you buy a new Snapdragon X Elite PC, because it has to, because that's what you need to be running the Germanium platform release to be able to use those devices. But to my knowledge, I don't think it will be rolling out as an update to existing PCs until the fall, like September, October time. So if you want, I mean, obviously insiders will have it. Like it will be done in April. Insiders will be testing it from April onwards. So technically, it will be out then. But in regards to general availability, the majority of Windows 11 users won't see it as an update until the fall, unless you buy a new PC in the summer with Snapdragon X Elite hardware on the inside.
Chris asked along those lines, any thoughts about whether Surface Go will get a version of the Elite X or will it be too much money? It'll be too much money. The Elite
Yeah.
X is going to be in like premium hardware. I think it still can go higher. Like I said, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't go to 16 and or 20 core at some point. That said, as I mentioned, it could also scale down. They can go from 12 cores to 8 cores to maybe even 4 cores. I don't know what their plans are, but that's the logical transition. And in which case, not only will the performance, of course, drop down, but still be very good compared to whatever Intel offers, which again is their real competitor here. It will also drop down the price. Not to mention, we're just talking about Gen 1 of Orion, right? So we're going to have Orion 2, Orion 3, and all that kind of stuff. But I think that will be the goal. Obviously, Qualcomm wants to. Qualcomm is serious about competing against Intel, they obviously need to compete against Intel at all levels as much as possible. So I think that's what will happen. Not really related. Although there is no year of the Linux, with Linux and macOS making incremental inroads into PC gaming, how does Microsoft maintain their share in the hardware gaming development space? I don't think this is an issue right now. Actually, I would say Apple maybe is a bit, I don't want to say a threat. Apple is doing a lot with its latest GPUs and its software, where gaming is going to be much more viable on that platform. Will it be a threat to the PC space? I absolutely not. part of the joy for PC gamers is especially building your own desktop PC, going all nuts with RGB and bands. I mean, I'm looking at mine right now. It looks exactly like that. Uh, running a big fat 4090, 4080 GPU, which will still blow away anything Apple ever does, right? Um, I think the PC gaming market has just grown quarter after quarter. It brings in a ton of money. I don't see that changing. I think all that will change is that Apple users will finally be able to get some gaming titles on their device for some of the bigger ones. And they'll have like more than, what is it, like 20 games maybe right now? I haven't followed, but I know there's not a lot. They will gain more and it'll be good for them. I don't see any PC gamers being like, I need the latest Mac, unless they're in that weird situation where they can only have one computer and their job, their professional life necessitates usage of Mac. In which case, don't forget Mac users could also use cloud gaming if that's a thing. But then again, you can use cloud gaming on, a Surface Go. So who cares? Regarding Linux, listen, I'm just looking at the latest Steam powered survey. So Steam Hardware and Software Survey, October 2003. They break it down by OS. Windows is 97.43% of Steam, the users. Windows 10 is 65%, Windows 11, 30%. That gets pretty close to what we're saying with the 70-30 split in general population. So 97% is Windows. OS 10 is 1.19%. Technically, it's dropped down by a quarter of 1%. So they've actually lost a little bit. Linux is just ahead of Apple at 1.39%, but those are also down by that's down by a quarter of 1%. I don't see any argument for gaming on Linux making any headway. I don't. All I see is like the same thing for Apple. For people who are in Apple's ecosystem and people who use Linux, you will start to get more options for gaming, which is great. There will never be a threat to PC gaming unless Intel and NVIDIA close shop. But even NVIDIA is rumored to be exploring ARM, meaning they can do this in laptops too. I think that's going to be something to watch. So that's my opinion there. Yeah, someone says unless Max the Max get an exclusive game. Yeah, that would help, but I would still say they probably need like 10 exclusive games to really start to make a difference. And it has to be all A+.
I'm surprised Apple hasn't made a console.
It's so much to do in terms of developer tools.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, that's the issue, right? Is getting that,
because I would think they would leverage their iPhone gaming library because they've been touting AAA gaming on
yes,
iPhone now.
Yeah, they really are big on their mobile gaming.
Yeah,
that's true. They do push that. Yeah, I think at that space to enter in right now to go up against Nintendo, who's kind of there, but Xbox and Sony.
Yeah, oof, right. I know. Yeah.
They could like if they invested like billions. It would still be a Hail Mary, but yeah, they got the market clout. But it would just take a long. The thing with PC gaming is like I can still play games from like 30 years ago. Not only can I play games from 30 years ago, a lot of times, most recently, they're taking games from 30 years ago and remastering them, which is wild. It's such a cool thing to do. So it's such a library. It's not just the latest games that people want to play. It's the fact that people want to play games from 10 years ago too.
The floating taskbar and the taskbar up top, are we still getting that, or did the new Windows leadership team scrap that? I'm pretty sure that was a Panos Panay thing, and the new leadership team are not too keen on that vision. Like I said, I think some parts of it will ship. Like I think the search bar at the top of the screen may still be a thing in some form, but the rest of it, I'm not convinced it's going to actually ship. Because it's a big it would have been a big change to the UX for Windows. And under Panos Panay, he was willing to make those risks, but I think the new leadership team don't want to rock the boat too much. They don't want to be seen as another Steven Sinofsky.
Someone says, yeah, NVIDIA makes an ARM chip for the Switch. No, yeah, I think so. I haven't. It's a good question. I forgot. But the bigger point is NVIDIA has experience in making ARM chips. They've been around doing that for a long time. They're apparently just going to go. Don't forget, they literally tried to buy ARM 2 years ago, right? That was the whole thing. Like they were really trying to get that market, but yeah, they have experience there, which is why I said the rumor with Nvidia and AMD getting to the market. I understand Nvidia; they have a long history in ARM. They have engineers there; they can do it. I don't see how AMD does this. They need to build an entire team, which means you have to get people from other teams. Like that's a hard challenge. So someone also says also Steam Deck success. If people start playing on Steam Deck, they'll start making ports for Linux so they can be played on Steam Deck. Possibly. Um, I see them as like I think if you buy a Steam Deck, like the Linux angle on Steam Deck is just there as the platform. Like I never plugged it in and ran Linux on a desktop and all that kind of stuff with it. It's literally just so it's like Nintendo. You kind of don't care what it's running. It's just you got your Steam games and you play. That's how they built it and why they did such a good job. You just turn it on out of the box, you enter your Steam, and you just got all your games, your library, install, play. There's no like fiddling around. Like with the ROG Ally, Windows 11 is a much more in your face operating system, and then you got to run an app on top of it. It really feels like that, so you have the OS first, app second. Steam is like Steam interface first, Linux is somewhere in the background, and that's kind of the difference there. I don't know if Steam's going to drive greater Linux adoption, but maybe.
Is Windows 12 going to revamp the administrative tools? There are 30 of them plus control panel. I don't know. I don't think they're going to revamp anything. No, I'm going to say no. They're not going to do that. All right, last call for questions. If there are no more, it's time to head off because I am hungry and I've not eaten dinner yet.
I haven't had lunch. And I gotta take these doggos out.
Doggos.
They're being very nice today. So
he's recovering.
yeah, oh yeah. Well, even Abby is like she's so chill. She's just right here by my desk. She's looking at me like, "Come on, take me outside." No, she's getting up. She's like, "All right, yeah, let's head off."
Yeah, let's head off. All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we will see you next time. Bye bye.